Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today we're going to be talking about my all-time favourite science fiction books. So I'm really excited for this video, which I literally say that at the start of every video, but I get so excited. So yeah, sci-fi is a genre which I've really been getting into recently and loving so much, and I have so many more that I want to read. But I have some definite favourites from all the books I've read. So if you're looking for some science fiction recommendations or just the best science fiction books to get into, then this video is for you. So let's just get started instead of waffling on for 10 minutes. So the first series I'm going to talk about is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. And this is such a great series, and I feel like it's quite a good beginner series as well, because the way it kind of escalates. So book one is it's quite easy to follow and get into, and but then by book 5 it's this massive expansive world with so much kind of politics and so many characters, and there's a lot going on. So I feel like it kind of builds you up to space opera level. In the first book we're following Darrow, who's a red, and the reds are this kind of oppressed class of society because society is kind of segregated by the colours, and the reds work in these mines. And basically Darrow's wife dies, it kind of for the rebellion, and there's this, okay, this is a side tangent, but there's this TV show called Final Space, which is really good, I would recommend it. And there's this one scene where one of the characters, Tribal, is talking about, it's the rebellion infiltrated the resistance, which did the insurrection, and talk about all these different words for all these different rebellion type things, and it just makes me think of every YA novel ever.
We build the resistance so we can resist the uprising against the insurgency, who's resisting the rebellion against the insurrection.
I'll try, and if I can find a little clip, I'll try and get it, but yeah. So yeah, that was the side tangent. So yeah, but then Darrow basically infiltrates the Golds, and the Golds are the kind of top dogs of society, and they're very posh and fancy and very powerful. They're all 6 foot and or probably 7 foot really, or 8 foot, but yeah, just they're these very powerful beings and the leaders of society. So Darrow kind of becomes a Gold. The first book, he's kind of undergoing these trials almost to become one of the, I'm not entirely sure what he's becoming, working for the kind of Gold enforcement, but then the books kind of escalate. So in the second and third books it becomes very much more space focused, and there's a lot of kind of space battles and that type of thing, and politics, and we get meet some new characters. Victra I love Victra, and yeah, and just the whole the different families in the Golds and how much drama they have with each other. It's just also juicy, and it sort of reminds me a little bit of a pantheon of gods, and I adore, well, I don't love them, but the villains are so good. Some of the villains are just, yeah, the characters are also good. I love Victra obviously, and Mustang, I love her, especially in the later books, when she's Virginia, and it's so good. Well, Virginia's her actual name and her nickname is Mustang, but she sort of takes on more of a role, which and I love, what's his name? I always forget him. The Grey, is it Grey? The Rogue? Something. I feel so bad that I forget him because he's one of my favourite characters. And then in the second half, Volga, she's so cute. And who else? I love Several. Several's this absolutely feral little goblin who's crazy, but yeah. Darrow is okay, he's an okay protagonist, but those other characters I love a lot more than him. Cassius, yeah. One time, this is another tangent, but one time I did a tweet which was a Cassius this tweet, and then Pierce Brown saw it, so which on another note, Pierce Brown is a very good looking author. If you need a reason to read the books, do it for him. And it was so well written, and especially the kind of later series, it just becomes so much more, and there's so many POVs, and it just becomes this whole yeah, space opera, and it's so good. So I'm really excited for the 6th book. And also if you like heartbreaking books, or getting your heart ripped out, then these series, because he really pulls no punches. Especially Dark Age. Dark Age is probably one of the most intense books I've ever read. Like, yeah, wow. And then next is two books, should not be a surprise if you've watched any of my videos, but that is Gideon and Harry the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and I love these books. Like, just the kind of chaotic and energy and just the whole, just everything is so good. Like the whole atmosphere. Gideon is such a character. She's so entertaining. She's so funny. Just, you can't help fall in love with these characters. So in the first one, we're following Gideon, who is she's living in the 9th house, which the houses are like kind of different planets almost. And she's been brought up in the 9th house, but she keeps wanting to escape. Like, she was brought there as an orphan, but yeah, so she keeps trying to escape, and she keeps getting thwarted by Harrow Hark, who is the reverend daughter of the 9th house. So she's almost like the princess. But then one day, so Harrow Hark is trying to enter this competition to become a lictor. And a lictor is this like almost god type figures in the world. And I'll separate them. Injuring my books. Yeah, and so she recruits Gideon to be her cavalier, which is like a bodyguard. So then they travel to, I think it's the first house, it's called Canaan House, and they enter in this competition with all the other houses to kind of become a lictor and discover the secrets to lictorhood. Yeah, and it just becomes so much more like, it turns into a bit of a murder mystery, especially in Gideon, because the characters keep dying and like they're trying to work out what's going on. And yeah, just Gideon and Harrow's banter and dynamic is hilarious. There's so many good jokes, like especially on reread, I just had so much fun reading them, and the characters are just so iconic. But like some of the lines like hit you so hard, like one flesh, one end. Oh. And then in the second book we kind of get more, it's more similar to Red Rising. Like the second book becomes much more space heavy, and we kind of almost follow this like pantheon of gods type thing. They're not, well, I guess one is a god, but the others are lictors. But yeah, just the whole dynamic, they remind me a lot of the golds from Red Rising. But just, yeah, and like Harrow is completely crazy, but you love her, and just all the other characters as well. Like in the first book, Cam and Pal, and oh, I love them, and Ianthe, and the lictors like Mercy Mon and Augustine, and it's just all so good. There's so many great characters, and it's just so entertaining, and you don't always like follow exactly what's going along on, but you just have to kind of be along for the ride, and it's so good. And the whole like necromancy and like bone magic is also so cool and like atmospheric, and yeah, so it's really good. Like I feel like the tagline is lesbian necromancers in space, which I feel like is quite a good tagline, but also I don't, especially Gideon, it's not really in space, but it definitely feels quite sci-fi, and the second book especially. So yeah, they're both really great books, so yeah, I'd highly recommend them. And next we have Becky Chambers' books, which she is one of my favourite authors, like, and especially like sci-fi authors. Her books, so we have, what do we have? We have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is the first one. Well, they're kind of in those, they're like Wayfarer series. It's kind of a series, but they're more like companion books. So like you could read them in any order. And then A Closed and Common Orbit. And then Record of a Spaceborne Few. And then The Galaxy and the Ground Within. And this is an arc, because this doesn't come out until February, I think. So yeah, this is an arc version. So that's the Wayfarer series. And then she also has To Be Taught If Fortunate, which is a novella, which is a separate like world, but it's also really, really good. So the Wayfarer's books, so The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, we're following the crew of this, just to shuffle them around, following the crew of this ship called the Wayfarer. And one day Rosemary, she's kind of coming to join the crew, and she has a few secrets, but they're kind of revealed throughout the book, and we're just kind of watching her like integrate with the crew and kind of learn to get on with them and like learn about everyone else, and just it's so like wholesome and heartwarming and kind of makes you believe in humanity. And you have all these different alien species and just like seeing how they kind of interact with each other and like respect each other's differences, and it's so good. And then the Wayfarer, it goes on this journey, it punches gates. So they're going to punch this gate to this kind of territory of a new like planet, which is kind of quite war ridden. I don't think that's the right term, but it's a very like unstable politically planet. So they're kind of going on this journey. So they're kind of traveling throughout, and you're mainly following them on the journey. But then there's a bit of like action towards the end where they get to this planet and things start happening. But just the characters are so good. And there's this pair of, like, they're not siblings, there's a friendship, Kizzy and Jenks, and they're one of my favourite friendships. And yeah, it's just so good, and her writing is like a warm hug, and yeah, well. And then, they're in the wrong order. So, and then Clear's in Common Orbit, we're following a character who is kind of an AI, and she's been put into a human body. And so she's kind of discovering the world as like essentially a human, because in the world it's seen as like bad to put AIs into human bodies, I think. And she's also joined, like, helped out by Pepper, who is this kind of engineer type character, and she has also a background of, like, quite a hard background. She was, like, raised in this very strange, almost cult thing. So we're also following Pepper's kind of backstory, which is really cool. And then in Record of a Spaceborne View, we're following, like, humans. I think they're called Exodians, and they're kind of humans who live in this, like, space fleet. And it's just kind of looking at how they live and kind of what you do when you've got nowhere left to go. Like, the humans aren't on Earth anymore, so they're kind of, and yeah, this one's very, like, contemplative. And yeah, this kind of discussion around death as well, like what makes a good death and that kind of thing, which I really enjoyed. And then Galaxy and the Ground Within, we're following these kind of 3 characters who get stranded on this planet at this, like, kind of hotel resort thing with 2 of the other characters called Ulo and Tuppo, who, like, run the resort. And yeah, unexpectedly they just kind of have to stay because these satellites break down in orbit. So it's just kind of these 5 strangers having to learn to, like, get along together and then eventually work together despite differences. And there's quite a lot of sort of prejudice and preconceived notions and just learning to kind of unpack those and like work together. And oh, it's just so beautiful. Yeah, and just her writing, oh, it's just everything. There's been like 5 minutes of me gushing about Becky Chambers, but she's, honestly, she deserves it. And then To Be Sort of Fortunate is probably one of my favourite novellas, and this one we're kind of following, it's very, like, ecology. They're kind of going from planet to planet and, like, discovering things about that planet, like the bio status of the planet, and that's all it really is. Like, there's a little bit of kind of thing where they communicating with Earth, and then I think they kind of lose their communication, and they have to decide what to do. But yeah, it's really good. So and just her writing is just And next we have The Martian by Andy Weir, and this book is just so much fun. Like, the science is really good, but Mark Watney, the main character, he is iconic. Like, he's probably one of my favourite, like, main characters to read from. So Mark gets stranded on Mars alone after his like crew, they sort of, a thing goes wrong and then he sort of ends up there. They think he's dead, but he's actually alive, so he ends up stranded and he has to survive. And yeah, it's just so good. His, like, wit and humour is so good, and there are just so many moments which, like, I found really funny, which maybe they weren't meant to be funny, but also there are a lot of moments which actually are funny. And just, yeah, he's a botanist, and his love of potatoes, just, oh yeah, it's really fascinating. And then we're also kind of following NASA as on Earth, as they kind of decide what they have to do, because they realise he's alive, and them trying to, like, rescue him, and that whole thing, and, like, whether they're going to tell the crew who are on their way back that he's still alive, and kind of what impacts that would have. And yeah, it's really good. And the way it's told as well is kind of him, like, Mark's, like, kind of journal update things, like his video logs. It's just really good. And yeah, so I would highly recommend that one also. And next we have The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. So the first one is Leviathan Wakes. I'm not going to go through them all. The second one is Caliban's War, and it goes on from there. So yeah, I really enjoyed the series. The TV show is also fantastic if you are looking for a good sci-fi TV show to get into. But yeah, no, I really like the books. I feel there's one character called Avasarala who is, like, this really powerful. She's like, I don't know exactly what her role in the UN is, but she's a very powerful political figure. And she is just iconic, and book Avasarala especially is, like, oh, she's amazing. She, like, swears so much. She's so funny. She's so, like, self-assured and confident and really sassy, and oh, she's amazing. I love her. Yeah, so we're following Avasarala tangent aside, we're following the crew of the Rocinante. So there's 4 of them. So there's Holden, who's, like, the captain, Naomi, Amos and Alex. and in the first book they kind of, the ship that they're on originally gets sort of blown up unexpectedly, and then they sort of end up embroiled in this kind of intergalactic, well, intersolar system, because it's not really galactic, it's just the solar system, drama with this. There's this thing called the proto-molecule, which is like this mysterious alien substance that is kind of causing a lot of drama and rife, and yeah, and the politics is so good. So there's kind of three, I would say, main factions. It's like Earth, Mars and the Belt. Yeah, and so there's just a lot going on. We also get other characters as well. Like generally you're following, in each book you're following the crew of the Rossi, and then there'll be kind of another one or two main POVs. So like in the first book you have Miller, who's this like detective, and he's trying to find out what happened to this character called Julie Mao, who's kind of gone missing, and she's also very entwined with like the proto-molecule and what's happening with that. And then yeah, in the second book you're following Avasarala and Bobby, and Bobby is like this Martian marine. Bobby is another one of my favourite characters. She's great. And yeah, so you're just kind of going along, and as this kind of unfolds, and I believe it's kind of almost like 3 sets of trilogies, because like they kind of just, there's some kind of storylines that get sort of wrapped up in each one, but also yeah, the kind of, I would say the interlinking factor is the Rossi crew, and yeah, it's really good series. So it's very like expansive space opera type thing. And next we have A Memory Called Empire and its sequel A Desolation Called Peace, which comes out in the beginning of March, I believe, but I've already read it, so that's why it's on this list, because I love them both. So especially A Desolation Called Peace, I love that book so much. But A Memory Called Empire is really good as well. I feel like it just takes a little while to get into, and like really, because it's a very there's a lot of kind of new terms, and like it's a whole new culture and stuff that you're learning about, so it just takes a little while to get into. But it's really good. So following Mahit, who is going to this other planet. Basically she's from Lisselle, not quite sure how to say it, station, who's kind of this subsidiary, I don't know what the term is, like they're a station under the control of this Texcani empire, and so this empire is quite like encroaching and like very like colonizery type thing. And so Mahia is going to be the ambassador to Texcani from the Cell Station, and but she's I don't know if she previously knows or she discovers when she gets there that the previous ambassador has died in kind of mysterious circumstances. So she's trying to like find out what's going on there, and the kind of Texcani is under a lot of like political strife and tension. Yeah, there's kind of a thing brewing, like with, I think someone's maybe like a coup trying to take over, and yeah, the emperor, and there's lots of like political players, and Mahi is kind of also trying to learn about this like Texcani, and she's kind of very enamored with this like new culture, and she's like gets taken under the wing of this other character called 3 Seagrass, who's like the kind of one of the like guides to the city, I guess. And oh, their friendship and blossoming into more is just so good. Yeah, just the politics is really good. And then the second book, it almost becomes like this first contact storyline with aliens, and you get more of Mahi and 3 Seagrass, who I love, and also you get more about Lucelle Station and like what's been going on there, because you don't see a lot of it in this book. You just kind of get it through how it's impacting Mahi in her current situation. But yeah, it's just so good, and the writing is really good as well. Yeah, like I said, it does take a little while to get into the first book, or at least I thought it did, just because there's like so much new stuff, and the characters, they have really weird ways of naming themselves. Like they all have a number, and then like a plant or animal or type thing, like 3 Seagrass, or there's another character called 12 Zayla. There's like 19 ads, who, oh, I love her. Yeah, and there's this little kid called 8 Antidote, and his nickname is Cure. Oh, that's so cute. But yeah, no, it's really good. So I highly recommend this series. Okay, and then next we have a new book which comes out in the beginning of February, which I'm including on this list because I don't know if this video will even be up like before then, so it may be out, or if it's not, get pre-ordering. And that is A Winter's Orbit by Avina Maxwell. And this book, oh, I just love it. It's like, it's another one of the like wholesome sci-fi, but also it's really good like political drama. Like if you've already read A Memory Called Empire, I feel like it has a slightly similar political setup to that one. But also it gives me major like red, white and royal blue vibes. Oh, it's just so good. So we're following two main characters, Kian and JN. And so basically JN is from this other planet who's coming, and he is like the ambassador for that planet. And he is previously married to Tam, who is Kiam's cousin, but Tam mysteriously dies. So then Kiam has to marry JN, like as a quick setup political marriage, in order to appease this like treaty for this intergalactic like force called the Resolution, in order to like prove the two planets like getting along. So yeah, so they're thrust into this like marriage, and they have to try and work together, partly to solve like what happened to Tam, but also there's also other things going on in the political scape. And just watching that is, so it's kind of, I would say it's quite heavily focused on the romance, and just watching their like friendship and romance blossom, and oh, it's just so good. And just how like Kiam reminds me a lot of Adolin, which is probably why I love him. Like just his colour like sunshine, and he's very like charming, and just watching him kind of be there and like supportive for Jaren, because Jaren's been through a lot, and like you kind of get the sense he's very kind of like reserved and kind of diminished almost, and just watching him slowly like learn to accept what's happened to him and accept his like worth, and oh, it's just so good. And just the relationship is so good. There's like this scene where they get stranded in the wilderness, and then they have to like, one of Kiam I think falls in the river and like gets really cold, and then they have to snuggle up, and just oh, it's like, yeah, I love that trope. And yeah, and there's other characters, like side characters, who are really great. Kiam has this like because he's the prince, and he has this like, was it like a personal assistant type thing, who's iconic. I love her so much, and their like friendship is so good. I really enjoy that one, and it's just so good. So yeah, it was like an instant 5 stars. Oh, and yeah, I already want to reread it. It's just like, oh. And because it wouldn't be a video without Brando Sando, we have Skyward, which is, I think it's YA sci-fi, and we're following Spencer, who's this kind of, she's very like small but fierce, and her dad was basically branded a coward. Like a coward's the worst thing you can be in this world, and because he kind of ran away from a space battle where they were like defending against these aliens, because there's these aliens called the Krell who are kind of attacking this planet, and yeah, basically there's this ongoing sort of war between the humans and the Krell. But Spencer really wants to be a pilot, so she kind of goes to this space academy to train, and she's trying to like prove that she's not her father and prove she's not a coward. But the world is very like, they have a very twisted definition of what's a coward, and they're just sending these poor kids into like space, and it's very kind of, it's not quite like cutthroat like some books, but it kind of in that way it sort of is. And yeah, just the whole like friendship group that develops between these like space cadets, and it's so good. And Spencer also finds her own spaceship, who's kind of turns out to be sentient, and he's called Ember, and Ember is one of the best characters. But like, I feel like Sanderson really excels at writing like kind of companions that aren't really like, they're not people, but like, so like you have Ember, and then you have Nightblood, and you have all the Spren, and just those kind of like characters I just love. Yeah, that's a really great series book as well. And then we have Sleeping Giants and Waking Gods and Only Human by Sylvia Newell. And this is this is quite like an earth-focused sci-fi, I would say. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it's very much focused on sort of what happens if they like discover alien technology. And there's not a huge focus on like the actual aliens, but it's more what would happen to the world and how the world would react to that, and like the political implications and repercussions of that. Because there's this, they discover this giant hand. Well, basically the main character, when she's little, she falls into this giant hand that like mysteriously appears, and then she grows up and becomes this sort of a scientist who's very kind of focused on that type of thing. And they discover essentially this whole body like distributed throughout the earth, and they sort of put it together, and yeah, it just becomes very like how different nations would react, and they sort of end up in this like war, and yeah, it just kind of goes off the rails. But yeah, so it's really good. It's very entertaining, and it's told in like this sort of interview format, and well, you can't really see, but the like interviewer guy, he doesn't really have a name, but he is so entertaining. Yeah, just very forceful personality, but so that's also really good. So I really enjoyed this series, and the covers are so pretty. I love shiny things, so yeah. And then next we have a few honourable mentions, just because they're, oh no, I have one more. real one. The others are just novellas, so. And that's Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. And this one we're following Kara, who can like travel between planets, but the catch is, so like parallel worlds rather than planets, but the catch is, in order to travel to a different parallel world, you have to be like dead in that world, and Kara is dead in quite a lot of the worlds, because she's kind of from a very like a certain background where she's kind of ended up dead, ended up dying. I don't know what real grammar is, in a lot of the other worlds. So yeah, so she's kind of working for this like government agency where they like go to the world to kind of get like intelligence, but then it becomes so much more. Like there's all these kind of secret government conspiracies and like corporate type drama, and Kara's like overseer Del, their relationship, so it's a sapphic relationship, and I was so invested in the relationship. It's so good. Like you only kind of get breadcrumbs, especially at the beginning, but just it's so good. And also Kara's like family, they're from this kind of separate parts of this kind of rich city and then kind of poor like outskirts, and they're from there, and like, and just seeing her like interact with the family. And then there's also this like gangster drama going on. Like this is, I feel like one of Kara's like other selves or something is like the kind of girlfriend of this like big mob boss, and they involve somehow, and just it's so good. It like becomes a bit of a thriller, and yeah, and there's also so many like really important themes as well, and it's just so good. So yeah, I would highly recommend that one. It's kind of, it reads quite thrillery as well, rather than like super intense sci-fi. Like there is a bit of kind of science and stuff, but it's not, I feel like this would be quite a good like beginner sci-fi also. So yes. A couple of novellas which are really good. So Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. This one's super short, it's like probably about 20 pages, but it's really good. I can't remember exactly what it's about. I just remember loving it. I feel like it's this, it's told from second person, which I feel like N.K. Jemisin is really good at. And it's kind of this person with like an artificial intelligence implanted in them, or like a skin, I feel like something to a skin, and they are discovering that maybe what they thought of this like world isn't actually, or they've been told, they've been kind of indoctrinated that the world is bad and like this space is good, but then they get to the world and they're realizing that actually it's not. It's kind of yeah, they've been told a lot of lies. So yeah, that's really good. Also Binti by Nadi Okumfor, that's really good. That kind of following Binti, and she is on her way to this like university, because she's like the first one of her people to go to this university, but then on the way their spaceship gets attacked and like everyone gets killed except from Binti, and then Binti has to kind of interact with these aliens. They're like jellyfish men. I don't really know what they are, to try and like, yeah, not die. So that's really good. That's an excellent series kind of, and then the later books as well, Binti goes back to Earth and like seeing about her culture and how that important that is to her, and like, but also how she kind of wants to escape as well. It's really interesting. And also Murderbot. The Murderbot books are so good. They're so entertaining. Like Murderbot is an iconic character. He's just kind of this like AI. He's a Murderbot. So like he's a security basically for like humans, and he'll like protect them. But he's so introverted, and all he wants to do is like sit and watch. Oh, I think it's a them rather than he. I always say he because the audiobooks are narrated by a man. All they want to do is like sit and watch their like soaps and called Sanctuary Moon and art, and then like throughout the series Metabot meets different AIs and like how they're different from him, and it's so good. Yeah, I really love it. And Metabot just gets himself involved in this like intergalactic drama, and then I think at one point he becomes like this wanted figure, and it's so entertaining and so good. So yeah, I really love that. I love middle grade sci-fi mentions, because middle grade sci-fi is like a really underrated genre. Like I've hardly read anything but the two that I have read are Orion Lost and Dragon Pearl, and they're both really good. So if you like middle grade and you like sci-fi, I would recommend them both. Yeah, Dragon Pearl is kind of, we're following this character, and her brother has sort of gone missing or gone to like be a recruit in the army, and she's sort of following in his footsteps and wants to find out what's happened to him. And she's also, I think, half kitsune, or she's full kitsune, like fox spirits. But there's also loads of ghosts in this one, and like ghosts in space is one of my favourite things. So yeah, I adored this one. And then also Orion Lost, we're following these characters, and they're sort of all on this ship on the way to like a different planet, because they're having to leave Earth, when suddenly everyone is like put to sleep except from these like 4 or 5 kids. So then the kids have to try and work out what's going on and like save the ship, and then it gets very interesting, because like there's almost something weird going on, because like they keep sort of waking up and having their memories wiped, and it's very like mysterious, and it's really good. And I feel like it's a really good look at kind of, especially because the main character is a girl, and just a really good look at like kind of leadership for girls. And I feel like that's especially leadership in STEM is a really good thing to explore in middle grade. So yeah, I also love this one. So this video is getting quite long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Comment down below with what your favourite sci-fi is. I would love to know, because I'm always looking to read more. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you next time.